Tom and John were brothers. Tom the younger, John the older. They were sent in from Hollywood casting to be your believable, authentic cowboy. They had never been much of anything else but cowboys. John, the elder one, apparently had decided sometime along his life to clam up. I don't think I ever heard the man say 5 words. Tom was the spokesperson for the pair, and what he said was what was intended for the two of them. I was told by Tom, primarily, over and over again, that his father was from Germany, and that the old man really didn't approve of the idea of America going to war with his homeland, and certainly he may have influenced them not to show up for the draft and go on to be soldiers. It was the fact of life that they probably were technically slackers. That was the terrible word that was put on young men who didn't show up for the draft. They were asleep in their cabin up on top of a mountain deep in the wilderness, and before dawn, in a light snowstorm, a posse shows up, stations itself at the 4 corners of the cabin, and then a bunch of shooting went forth. 4 or 5 guys died up on that mountain in 30 seconds. It was a terrible moment. My feeling was, we as a society are now on trial. And that is going to have to be the thread of my approach to this story. We're not going to be able to retrial the power boys in the newspapers. Witnesses are gone. The testimony is lost. The forensic medicine was never taken. I didn't get involved in that. My story was, can society accommodate and be mature enough to bring about their release? Many of the letters that I did receive, directly or roundabout through my publisher, revisited and wanted to rehash some of the ugly rumors that had surrounded this story. How did Ola die? All of that was rehashed and brought up again and again and again in the letters that I got, and they were fairly easy to answer by being obtuse. But I think it was in late spring of 1960, and the hearing finally was granted. The parole board met at one end of this huge metal building, maybe 200 or 300 people, many of them from the valley where the victims had made their home. And Tom and John were up front. The parole board met like the tribunal up front, and the hall was full. And here 3 elders, they were called bishops of the Mormon Church. Each of them rose and spoke, and spoke rather eloquently. They were speakers of the time served, the questions of fair trial arose. The 4th person who spoke was a stake president, and I think you have to have lived with the Mormons a long time, which I have, to realize that a stake president is like an archbishop or a cardinal in the Catholic Church, a very high-ranking person. This guy's name was Lorenzo Wright, and Lo Wright was a widely known and respected businessman. He got up, and he was like the Lion of Judah. What a speaker. And he marched up and down the aisles, and he waggled his finger, and he spoke directly to people, and his voice would make those metal walls tremble. And he says, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." And did we ever listen to that? It was just the climax and the moment of change in the whole mood in the room. And a few days later, the parole hearing ended in the decision to grant them parole. You have to know something about the main gate of the old relic of the prison at Florence, Arizona. It's a couple of stories high, and there's huge, almost symbolic bars of iron that swing open, and it's really quite dramatic setting. Here these two guys come out and blinking in the sunlight, the freedom, and I'm allowed to be there to give them a brotherly hug as they come out. And here's this old turtle of a man named John, and he has a school lunch bag, a paper brown bag. He's huddling this thing down inside of his crook of his arm, and Tom comes out. He's the master of ceremonies, and they have discussed this, you see, in their cell. How are they going to orchestrate all of this? And Tom wrestles a little bit with his brother, and he says, give me that, and they grab this, and he reaches inside, and he brings out a pair of these wonderful, homemade, hand-forged, silver-mounted, classic cowboy spurs. And he said, showing this Spanish rowel, he says, we made parade spurs for you because we knew you were a dude. That was his exact, and they gave them to me. And I have, by this time in my life, have received a certain amount of awards in my life, but this one was the best I ever got. My personal feeling was that I was exercising my responsibility as a member of the Fourth Estate, risking, by the way, a certain amount of career. I think I probably could have gotten myself fired if I didn't have the right publisher. And it worked. That's what I take away from it. I had the opportunity, I had the audience, I had the vehicle, I had the freedom, I had the publisher, I had the story, and I had the opportunity to hold it up to society and say, can I be the agent for society to make the right decision after all these years? And in that instance, it worked. I felt a great feeling of redemption out of it. Not hero, no, don't get me wrong, but that the system envisioned by people like Jefferson and Abigail Adams and Hamilton and some of the other grand founders of our country, that the faith in the people to make ultimately the right decision came to pass. Now, if others take other messages and lessons from this, fine, but that was mine.